Hello dear student friends, I am Vimala, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, Avinash Lingam Institute for Home Science and Higher Education for Women, Coimbatore. So today I am going to discuss about socio-cultural status of women. So this concept itself very interesting. Today it is a great challenge to everyone to understand the socio-cultural status of the women. The modern women are declined towards the social issues and trying hard to improve the social status of the women at large. Increased awareness and education has inspired women to come out of the four walls of home. Many women actively support and participate in nationalistic movement and secure eminent positions and offices in administrative and public life in free India. Traditionally, Indian women exist because of the family and for the family only. Just like their man counterpart, women are also fond of attending social functions and values her social life quite a lot. Previously, men folk used to discourage women for leaving their households for attending social functions. But now, the spread of education, especially that of women, and with that of changing social attitude of educated women, a woman has been made a order of change today. Now let us have a glance about women from the point of historical perception. So the historical background of Indian society reveals that Vedic times a woman was given an higher status. It is an old saying that where women are honored as a gods reside there. She is also known as a Ardhangini, that means one half of the husband's body. At the time of marriage, she as a bride was entitled to procure certain solemn vows from the bridegrooms before the ritual fire. No religious ceremony by the husband could bear fruit without her participation. As a mother, wife and sister, she occupied an honored place. She is an epitome of courage and boldness, love and affection. She sacrificed and suffered a lot. However, during the course of history, women lost their honored place due to social, economic and political factors. So evil customs like sati, parda, child marriage, enforced widow, dowry system crept in society. This led to decline in women's status inside and outside the home. During the last few years, the sexual harassment at workplace, eve-teasing, addiction, female festicide has given an inclination of the horrible behavior pattern prevailing in the society. Majority of the women live a life of dependency that does not possess any self-identity. They struggle for equality, justice and parity between women and men continues without more and more literature appearing on the subject of empowerment of women. The concept of Matru Devo Bhava, that we say that mother of goddesses, is an old sentiment shared by many Indians. From the time immemorial, women have been considered as a goddesses like Durga, Parvati, Kali, Shakti, Vaishnava Mata, Bhairavi and so on, so forth. Indians put them on the pedestal and offered prayers and sacrifice. But in contrast, more goddesses are being killed in womb, burnt alive for dowry, harassment in workplace and streets, raped, addicted, then exploited, discriminated, etc. Indian citizens venerate and salute this country as a Janani or mother. On other hand, they worship this mother, and on the other hand, they disregard these sisters, mothers and wives. So this is how the historical perspective says a perception of women. But let us understand what is the status of women at current. Women form about half of the population in the country, but their situation has been grim. For centuries, they have been deliberately denied opportunities of growth in name of religion and socio-cultural practices. Before independence, women were prey to many disgusting customs and traditional prejudices and vices due to which their status in the society touched its nadir and their situation was also round bleak. They were victims of widespread literacy, segregations in the dark and dingy rooms in the name of parda, forced child marriage, indeterminable widowhood, rigidity of fertility opposition of remarriage of widows, turning many of them into prostitutes, polygamy, female infanticide, violence, forced to follow sati, complete denial of individuality. Beside the economic dependency, earlier guidance of the husbands and in-laws, heavy domestic workload have been remained unpaid and unrecognized, absence of the career and mobility, non-recognition of their economic contribution, poor work conditions and wages, monotonous jobs which men generally refuse to do, this was responsible for their pathetic conditions. So there are some exploitation for women also. Let us have understand what type of exploitation was women has facing. A woman in Indian society has been victim to humiliation, torture and exploitation. There are many episodes like rape, murder, dowry, burning, wife beating and discrimination in the society, socio-economic and educational field also. In Indian society, it is predominated by men. Indian is a male chauvinistic society, hence women are a victim of male domination in respective of sphere of life. Especially in economic life, for instance, our decision making on resources, on utilization of her earnings and or on her body. Hence, women's life lies between the pleasure at one end and danger at another end. In daily life, women are routinely defined by sex and they are potentially victim of kidnapping and rape. The human species has made significant progress in several spheres of life, but man has not gone enough to overcome the self-made mental slaveries to the laws of the jungle. So there are some objectives why we need to study the socio-cultural status of women. The first object is to understand different socio-cultural status of the women across the nation. The second objective is to know the role of women in economic development, to study the historical perception of the women's status, to find out the impact of socio-cultural factors on rural and urban women empowerment, to help the status of women to improve their standard of lifestyle, to empower the status of women with the help of socio-cultural dimension. These are the few objectives which we have kept in mind to understand the status of the women. So let us understand especially the status of women in India. Women's status is very complex issue and an hard to define subject. Around the world, women's status in each society and culture varies different way. In some societies, women's status improved gradually, while in other it declined or remained unchanged. The status of women in India has been subject to many great changes over the past few millennia, with a decline in their status from ancient to medieval times to the promotion to equal rights by many reforms. The history of women in India has been eventful. In modern India, women have held high offices including that of President, Prime Minister, Speaker of Lok Sabha, leaders of the opposition, Union Minister, Chief Minister, Governors, etc. Women's rights are secured under the Constitution of India, mainly equality, dignity and freedom from discrimination. Further, India has various statutes governing the rights of women. Women during the early Vedic period enjoyed an equal status with men in all aspects of life. Work by ancient Indian, that is Graminians, such as Patanjali's and Katyani, suggests that women were educated in the earlier Vedic period. Rig Veda verses suggest that women married at a mature age were probably free to select their own husbands in their practice, which is popularly known as Swayamvara. Or we can also call it as a live-in relationship. Today we call it as a living together, but in the ancient Vedic only it has represented life Gandharva marriage. Scripts such as Rig Veda and Upanishad mention several women saints and seers, notably Gargi and Maitri. So on the other hand, the Rig Veda also mentioned women lack discipline and intellect and have hearts of hyans. For example, Shaptapati, Brahmana, women Shudra, dogs and crows are also untruth. Initially, women were allowed to undergo initiation and study the Vedas. In Dharma Sutra of Harita, it is mentioned. There are two types of women, those who becomes the students of Veda and those who marry immediately. Of these, the student who read Veda undergo initiation and kindle and sacrifice a scared fire. The study of Veda and beg food in their own house. In case of those who marry immediately, however, when the time of marriage comes, the marriage should be performed after initiating them to some manner. This is what's spent in Harita. Status of women in modern India. How the status of women in modern India defines. The status of Indian women began to change radically during the modern period. Historically, the period after 1750s, it is known as a modern period only. So, the status of women during the period can be divided in two stages. The first stages we divided as the status of women during the British rule in India, and second one is the status of women in post-independence period. So, let us understand during the British rule what is the status of women in India. After the fall of Mughal Empire at a decisive battle of Plassey in the 1775, the British people established their complete supremacy over the Indian people. During the British rule, a number of changes were made in the economic and social structures of our society. Though the quality of life of women during the period remained more or less the same, some sustainable progress was achieved in eliminating inequalities between men and women in education, employment, social rights, and so on. Some social evils such as child marriage, sati system, devadasi system, parda system, prohibition of widow remarriages, marriages, etc. were a great hurdle in the path of women's progress, were either controlled or removed by the suitable legislations at that time. After the lapse of several centuries made all Indians basis to tackle the problems and confronted women. Social reforms with a patriotic spirit on the one hand and the British government of the other together took several measures to improve the status of women and to remove some of their disabilities. This is the status of women during the British rule. So, after the independence, that is a post-independence period, the status of women is slightly changed. That is, radical change we have been seen. Both the structural and cultural changes provided equality of opportunities to the women in education, employment, and political participation. With the help of these changes, the exploitation of women to the greater extent was reduced. More freedom and better orientation were provided to the women's organization to pursue their interests. The centuries of slavery were over. Today, women want equality, education, and recognition. The advancement of women is most significant fact of modern India. So, Gandhiji once said, woman is a noblest of God's creation, supreme in her own sphere of activity. Okay, this is about the status of women during the British rule and post, that is independence. Now, let us understand some of important factors, what this socio-cultural factor says about. The socio-cultural factors concentrate on customs, lifestyles, and values that categorized a society. Some examples are religion, attitude, economic status, class, language, politics, and law. These factors affect the quality of life, business, and health. For example, those without economic means often have poor health. According to the National Institute of Health, socio-cultural factors are a large-scale forces within culture and the society that affect the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of individuals. Socio-cultural norms influence how people engage and interact with their environment. This lesson describes, this experience also describes the socio-cultural factors that impact the socio-economic development. Okay, let us understand one by one what is this socio-cultural values and economic development deals with. Every society has a set of values, beliefs, traditions, habits, which is known as their socio-cultural values. These values shapes how we approach risk, how we view careers, our perceptions of money, our ideas on ideal lifestyle. Because of these socio-cultural values, one of many interacting factors that can impact economic development within country and social cultural values. Some socio-cultural values that can impact economic development are materialism or post-materialism, collectivism or individualism, innovation, religion, obedience, thrift, risk propensity, etc. So the economic development is when a society shifts from traditional agricultural based living style into the industrial based living style or a business driven society. For example, industrial revolution and the move from forming of factory jobs in general economic development is associated with a high quality of life and an overall increase in the standard of living. Because of the socio-cultural values influence how as a people in a society interact with the world, they are also influence how we approach the process of the socio-economic development. Okay. So now let us understand the role of women in India. Traditionally, an Indian woman had fourfold status, role sequence. These were her role as a daughter, wife, housewife or homemaker and a mother. There is a major role of women in India. She is playing a role of fourfold, that is a status role sequence. These were role in daughter, wife, housewife, homemaker, mother. The woman whose status and role traditionally was well defined and almost fixed in the society is now what we are experiencing and far reaching changes. The woman in modern times is entering into certain new fields that were unknown to the women's sphere of role set. They are activating, participating in social, economic and political activities. The women of present generation have received higher education than the women of their presiding in the previous generation. There have been far reaching consequences in the economic status of the families. The role of women in a society also plays a very important role. The modern women are declined due towards social issues and trying hard to improve the social status of the women at large. Increased awareness and education have inspired the women to come out of four walls of the home. Traditionally, women exist because of family and for the family. Just like their men counterpart, women are also found as attending a social functions and values. Our social values are quite a lot. Previously, men focus used to discourage women from the living of their households for attending the social functions. Now, the spread of education, especially that of women, with that the changing social attitude of educated women have changed the order. The woman has started carrying her health, figure, culture, needs, interest, academic pursuits, social intercourse, religions and activities, recreational needs, etc. So there is a role as a wife. So woman plays a prominent role as a wife. Woman as a wife enjoyed a status ideally almost equally to her husband and performed both social as well as biological functions. Even today, the Indian girls are still brought up on models portraying selfishness, self-denial and sacrifice. The desire of mutual affection and the love is being to appear in their conception of their relationship with the husbands. Okay? The husband-wife relationship has become more equilibrium in character and much more compassionable. More freedom of choice in marriage in thus the accompaniment to the change in the form of the family. Women as a role as a politics. Education of women has not only helped them to become aware of political problems, but they are also gradually becoming active in participants in a political life also. Some are enrolling themselves as a member of political parties, attending party meetings, conventions and trying out the political programs. Some women are attaining the influential political stature of their own and have become that is instrumental in shaping the public opinion for the betterment of women conditions in the society. Now let us understand women's role in socio-economic activities. The woman in modern times is entering into certain new fields that were unknown to the women's sphere. Role set. There are women's participation in economic, political and social life. The modern women are keenly desired to enter into work career because of pressing economic needs of the family in middle class families, such as emphasis given to maintain a high standard of living, to fulfill their economic requirements of family and to achieve the highest standard of living. The women participate in economic activities. The role of women in marriages. Most of the women, even educated, regards marriage as a matter of parental choice only. Many young girls of the middle and upper class educated intending to marriage rather than the career. Many girls enter into career apparently not because they want them, but because there is nothing else to done unless their parents find their husband. The role of women as a universal or equality. See, let us understand women equality regarding education, employment, power instill an individual rather than universal achievement. The majority of our women are still content to accept an inferiority status. It is largely because although illegally women are equal rights with the men, there are not enough jobs for women. Working women are not adequately protected from the exploitation. So it is very important, less awareness about a legal status. The women have not aware about the provision relating to the improvement of their own status or position. There are so many rights of women provisions, and they know it's perfectly the rights of succession, marriages, or family. About they do not involve in their provisions, they just because they do not have any desire. There are many families who restrict to the women for the rights and enjoyment. The reason is they have rights for traditional dominance of the authority of male, husband and other elder members of the family. Most of the women are suffering from traditional dominance, and they are not raising her voice for against their rarely. Rarely women are raising their voice against the traditional dominance. Women in rural India. So in India or in any nation development, the woman plays a very equal important role in India, and Gandhiji vision, according to the constitution, women have more rights for enjoyment and privileges while they are urban women for rural women. Generally, most of the women are living in urban area, which is middle class or educated women. They have rights of rising the movements of socio-economic status, but rural women yet to enjoy the rights and privileges to enshrine in their constitution. Women as a welfare organization. There are many organizations for women welfare. Here, such organizations at national level are important organizations are example. Women Christian Association, All India Women's Conference, National Council for Women, Inner Wheel Women sections of Rotary International. There are also local organizations for the women welfare in many cities like Mahila Mandal, Mahila Samiti, etc., recreation clubs, etc. To conclude, the socio-economic status or the socio-cultural status of a woman is women should be educated, just not a threshold of transition from tradition to modernity. The women themselves desire that their status and the position in the society should be rise high. The traditional status and the role set of women are breaking up, and new role set based on achievement, independence and equality are gradually upcoming. The modern women are started caring for her health, figure, culture, needs, interest, academic pursuit, social intercourse, in religious activities, recreational needs, etc. The women of the present generations have generally received higher education than the women of their preceding generation. There have been far-reaching consequences in the social status of the families. The woman whose status and role traditionally was well defined and almost fixed in the society is now experiencing far-reaching changes. The woman in the modern times is entering into certain new fields and that were unknown to the women's sphere of role set. They are activating, participating in social, economic and political activities. So you can see a remarkable change in socio-cultural status of women in the India as well and across the globe also. So with this I will conclude this. Thank you, dear students.